I'm Gary C. Johnson. You've seen these billboards and ads that say size matters. I agree. The size that matters is the size of the results the law firm gets for their clients. We have several multi-million-dollar verdicts here in Kentucky. In fact, our firm owns the record for the single largest personal injury verdict in the state of Kentucky. That's the size that matters to you. In Kentucky, give our firm the call.
If you're hurt, injured, don't waste time. Gary Johnson tries for every dime.
Welcome to Simply the Law of Life, a program created by attorney Gary C. Johnson. Simply the Law of Life provides free legal advice and encourages happiness and quality of life. Now, here's Simply the Law of Life with Gary C. Johnson and Keith Casebolt.
Hello, everyone. Welcome into Simply the Law of Life. I'm Keith Casebolt, and the guy who came up with this wonderful idea of this program, my dear friend, Gary C. Johnson.
And my dear friend, Keith Casebolt, who's the producer. Now remember, if it's a bad show and you don't like it, it's not my fault, it's the producer's fault, right?
So I'm going to get all the emails saying, why'd you talk about that?
Yeah. Okay. So if you got any complaints about this, direct them to Keith because, he's the producer, right?
All compliments go to Gary, all complaints go to Keith.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, that's the system now, and it will work beautifully for me. Okay? How you guys and gals doing? World treating you okay? I hope you're getting a glimmer of what's going on here with these thoughts in your head, right? That little voice, better known as the chatterbox, sometimes known as Old Slick. Which one of those guys called it Old Slick?
It was Joe Namath, the great quarterback who won the Super Bowl for the New York Jets. And I was listening to an interview with him, and he said, this voice in my head, he said, it tells me to do things, and it tells me things about myself. He said, I call him Old Slick. And he said, anytime he starts talking to me, I talk to him, and I say, good try, Slick, but you're not going to get me. And he actually gave it a name and worked with it. Mm-hmm.
Well, if worse comes to worse, name your voice. Call it your name. We've talked about that before. But the main thing is don't buy into letting it make you miserable. Now, can you keep it from making you miserable? Maybe not. Maybe you want to have it make you miserable. Huh?
Gary, in this past year with the pandemic, and all of our lives were changed. Socially, we didn't get to see people. We didn't get to go out to eat. We didn't go to events. We were quarantining. We had the major fear of the pandemic. How much more severe did it make the voice and the negative thinking and everything for everybody?
What I wanted to say to you and talk to you about for just a second is misery loves company, right? If you're around somebody miserable, before long you'll become miserable. It's contagious. So is happiness, by the way. But do we use, to a certain extent, the things that's happened to us in our life that are bad as an excuse, as a safety net to keep from doing and going forward? You ever think about that, friends? In other words, I would do this, but this happened to me in the past. I would do that, but Analyze, if you're doing that, analyze yourself and see. Like she's got an example in this book here of this man who spent his life talking about, up into his 40s, talking about how his mother never appreciated him, how his mother never encouraged him, how his mother would downplay anything that he tried to accomplish. And every time anything happened in his life, he would bring that up as a reason why things didn't work out for him. And this psychotherapist here, Nancy, she asked him, she said, okay, let's assume that was never in your life, this mother thing. Let's just assume that. What would you do? And the guy hesitated in answering, and looked at her and said, I might just have to be responsible myself for what I'm doing.
So the revelation came about that, in fact, it wasn't his mother holding him back. It was he who
It was his safety net.
Yeah. So anytime there was a failure, he could come back and say, well, Bill or Bob, you could have done that if you'd only got encouragement from your mother growing
When you were younger.
When you were younger, you could have been this or you could have done that. So it was the safety net for him not to fail on his own.
So, my friends, are any of you doing that?
So
you don't have to raise your hand.
I'm sitting here thinking of all the examples. So I could have played on the team if the coach hadn't not liked me. You know, the coach didn't like me. That's why I didn't make it.
Right.
Yeah.
But got a real good book. Let's go to the computer. There's our number in case any of you need to reach us. We're in Lexington. There's our office and number. You can reach me, Gary, at GaryCJohnson.com. I'm going to read to you from this book, Can't Stop Thinking by Nancy Collier, some things she has to say about. And hopefully I'll get through more of it than I got through of the book last week.
What that is a hint that if Casebolt doesn't interrupt and talk too much, he'll actually get the lesson out.
I don't think so. It's okay to interrupt Facebook. If you're thinking it, trust me, some of my friends are.
I love the book.
We'll start off with non-judgmental seeing, okay? Awareness can also be developed through the practice of non-judgmental seeing. Our thoughts are made up of opinions, likes and dislikes, interpretations, analysis, and judgments. The practice of non-judgmental seeing, on the other hand, is the exercise of experienced life, even if it's just a moment here or there, without adding our opinions and judgments into what we're experiencing. If it sounds radical, it is because it is. It's the complete opposite of the way most of us normally live. In non-judgmental seeing, we practice being in the present moment without supplementing it with our thoughts about what's happening. Our experience simply happens, and we refrain from formulating a set of ideas about it, what it means, and all the rest. We live it without the whole commentary that usually accompanies it in our mind. Now we're going to have an exercise, and you guys are going to do it with me, okay? On non-judgmental thinking. I like this little exercise. First, I'm going to read to you what it is, so then I'm going to ask you to do it, okay? While it may sound inconceivable to live without constant opinions, the practice of non-judgment is actually not that hard to get the hang of. However, it can feel very strange when you first start given the fact that we spend our entire lives formulating thoughts and opinions about, well, everything. Here's the thing we're going to do in a minute, but I'm going to put you on guard on what it is before we ask you to do it. 1, close your eyes and take a deep breath through your nose. Bring the air all the way down into your big old belly, okay? Hold it for a little bit, and then breathe out a long, slow time through your mouth. Hold it. Do this a few times or more if you'd like. Scan through your body and notice whether there are any places of constriction or tension. Offer these places an invitation to relax and release what they're holding. Take your time. Just to ask them to relax. Now open your eyes and look around the room. See what you're seeing, but refrain from internally commenting on it. Don't name it, what you're seeing. Decide whether you like it. Decide what needs to be done about it, or do anything else for that matter. Just look. Take in what's in the space without language and without knowing anything about it. Then notice what this experiment invokes in you. Okay? We're going to do it, folks. You ready? Let's start. Close your eyes.
Okay.
Take some deep breaths through your nose. In and out, down to the belly.
Okay.
Now, pick an object around the room, look at it.
You can't do it. I was just looking over at the light over there, Gary, and I was thinking, we really need to move that over. I broke it that quickly.
Mm-hmm. Well, you weren't supposed to.
I know.
Without our opinions added on, life feels different. Still rich, but just different. Through this practice of non-judgmental seeing, we start to taste a way of experiencing life that's not defined by judgment and commentary. You might say, not lived through our thoughts. When we give ourselves permission to live without having to come up with a narrative or an opinion on what we're living, our addiction to thinking naturally eases. As a result, we end up feeling profound freedom and a deepening relief.
But doesn't that go against everything that we do on a daily basis? I mean, anything that we see, automatically we start telling ourselves if we like it, we don't like it, what we would change about it, or we question.
But that's what she's saying, is get yourself in this state of breathing first, then try to take any tension out of your body, and then just pick an object and just dumb your brain up and just look at it and don't think, just look at it. Don't even recognize it's a light.
Yeah.
Just look at it and see what happens.
I think
that's what she's saying. It's just the
that,
fun of it. Well, we're just having fun, right?
Oh, it is fun. But, what shocked me is how quickly I failed the test.
Well, Keith, we won't hold that against you.
And we do this in everyday life. As you were reading that chapter, I was thinking about an individual one time that was talking about this other person, and they said, I just don't like them. They're arrogant, they're negative, they're this, they're that. And I said, you must have had a bad encounter with them. And they said, no, I've never met them. But that's basically what she's saying. You form opinions of people, situations, and things, and it could completely be all wrong.
Mm-hmm. Anytime you make an assumption and assume something, you're wrong.
Out of all those agreements,
because
Gary,
that assumption, when you make that assumption about what somebody else is thinking or whatever, when you make that assumption, you're making it based on your life experiences and who you are, not who they are. You're always wrong.
How many times have we heard someone say, I know what they were thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you absolutely do not know what they were thinking.
Never.
You have no clue. It could be a whole heck of a lot worse, or it could be a whole heck of a lot better. But I promise you do not know what they're thinking.
Because you have made an assumption. Remember years ago when I talked to you about imaginary slights and how dangerous they are in a marriage and any time? Because when you imagine a slight in your mind, the other person doesn't know what they did wrong. They can't fix it because they don't know what it is.
Are you saying that right now there could be someone watching this program that hasn't spoken to a friend because they assume that friend did or said something wrong to them?
Or worse than that, they're pouting right now.
Uh-huh.
In fact, I know for a fact they are because that popped in my head to say that. So quit pouting. You're probably wrong on what you assumed. I guarantee you are. Ask a person. Talk to them. A little communication never hurt anything, you know.
Yeah, you might just get the answer.
Yeah, you might get the answer. May not like it, but you'll at least get an answer. Yeah? I'm going to read to you a little bit more from this. She's got a lot in it about, this section is a painful paradox to self-care. Clinging to suffering is a way of trying to take care of ourselves. We're convinced that the kernel of resolution will appear from somewhere inside the rubble of the problem. But usually the only thing that appears is more suffering. We're left stuck in the rubble, scavenging for that unfindable gem of relief. And she's talking about stuff that's happened in the past. So too, continually thinking about what hurts makes us feel that our pain matters, that it didn't happen for no reason, and that it won't be forgotten. We refuse to steer our attention away from what hurts because doing so feels like abandoning our pain and thus abandoning ourselves. We stay with our suffering to keep our suffering company. As a client Morgan expressed, it's so painful to turn away from what hurts, even more painful than it is to think about or feel it. When we think about leaving our pain behind, a great sadness can arise, and we're making the choice to ignore our wounds, to turn a deaf ear to their truth, our truth. To stop engaging with thought seems to say that our pain doesn't matter, or maybe worse, it's not real. To stop revisiting our hurt can feel like we're moving on before the hurt has been properly heard, validated, or soothed. In this way, our attention, in the form of thinking, can feel like a salve to our wounds. And this is an example he uses about that. I had known Sharon for many years before she lost her child in a car accident. For the decade that followed, she talked about her child every time we met and about how she couldn't live without her daughter here on the planet with her. Her pain had been excruciating since the accident. Understandably, at one point I asked her with the deepest compassion who she would be if this were not in the center of every moment of her life. She told me that she didn't want to be anyone else. She didn't want to move on. If she didn't think about her daughter wouldn't exist, and she couldn't allow that. She would never survive that. She told me without question she would rather suffer every moment for the rest of her life as opposed to move on from this. For Sharon, it couldn't be over. She couldn't let it be over ever.
Gary, I can understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the cross that you've chosen to bear,
mm-hmm.
that you're going to take with you. Now, not letting it go. I wanted to ask you this because there's the old saying, when you make a mistake or something's happened, did it hurt? Well, if it hurt bad enough, you won't repeat it. So do we hold on to that hurt, trying to protect ourselves from getting hurt again?
Or it's a safety mechanism. You're validating the thing that caused you to have the pain,
mm-hmm.
your mental pain. And you can't let go of that because you think you would be diminishing, especially if it's a loss of a loved one or something like that.
Right.
What they meant to you.
So in other words, by holding on, it shows the commitment and the feeling that you had for that.
When it serves no real purpose.
For your happiness. I understand.
So I'm going to read these a little more. You might hold on to your suffering because you're not ready for the past to be past. You may not feel ready to let go of that the pain contains, and also not ready to let go of the hope that your past could become a better past, which is impossible. We return to our painful thoughts and memories as a way of coming home to ourselves, returning to a core of self-experience. Pain can feel deeply familiar. It may be how we felt in our families growing up. Pain in its own way can be comforting. It's what we know, a state of being that feels like home. As a felt experience, pain has a weight and depth that is grounding, calming even, as opposed to happiness, which can feel light, untethered, and without roots. For many people, pain can actually feel safer than happiness. Think about that.
Now, that is interesting.
While we can acknowledge that focusing on our pain may have a self-caring intention, nonetheless, we must also acknowledge that in practice, it does not take care of us. You need to give proper attention to your wounds. No one can skip this step, but you must also recognize when you've acknowledged and felt you're hurt enough, spend enough time honoring it. You don't have to live in or from your pain in order to know it or take care of it. Pain will present itself when it needs to. It will arise organically when you're in it. But you're not obligated to bring pain into this now when it's not naturally here. You don't need to wallpaper the present moment with suffering in order to prove that it matters.
Okay, so I told you some time ago about an individual that said, I always expect the worst. And if something good happens, so be it. And I asked you about this individual, and you said that in itself was a safety mechanism to keep from failing or to keep from getting hurt, that they always expected it to be bad.
They've already lived the disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Instead of waiting for it to happen, they went ahead and lived it in their mind.
And so on a daily basis, do we do that by saying, well, it'll never work, or this will go wrong, or that'll go wrong, or I'm sure something will derail my plans or my thoughts? We do that ourselves?
To ourselves. I want to read you the little practice section she's got on it, then we'll be done with this, okay? This practice can help you discern, my friends. Now listen up, those of you that are still with us. It's not click the channel off quick. What, is there anybody left?
Yeah, we've got a couple.
This practice can help you discern when your devotion to your pain, when keeping company with your suffering, is no longer helpful or self-loving, and when you compulsively and habitually scratch at your wounds. All of us have to decide when enough is enough. The next time you're caught in a painful memory or thought loop, stop for a moment and place one hand on your heart. Feel the kindness in this simple gesture of inviting your own heart into the space, and take a deep breath. Ask yourself with curiosity, not judgment, have I sufficiently acknowledged the suffering that this particular situation has caused me? With your hand on your heart.
Yeah.
If not, take a few moments and offer yourself that acknowledgement, that compassion. Remind yourself that this matters. Say it out loud. Then ask yourself whether going over the situation again, retelling the story, revisiting the pain and the hurt, rehearsing a case against whomever harmed you, is actually easing your suffering. Is it coming up with a solution? Is it changing what happened? Is it making you feel better? If it is, then by all means continue. But if it isn't, then give yourself permission to stop. While turning away from your painful thoughts can feel counterintuitive, unloving, and even re-traumatizing. In fact, more often than not, it's the very thing you need to do to feel better. So take genuine care of yourself and do this practice. Take this moment and give yourself a chance at contentment. At first, it can feel like you have to gather up all your strength, brace yourself, and rip your attention away from painful thoughts, like a bandage off of a deep cut. But every time you shift your attention in this conscious way, every time you decline pain's invitation and refuse to engage with painful thoughts, you're doing three important things. One, you're loosening your attachment to negativity and suffering. Two, you're building the brain muscle that you use to direct your own attention. And three, you're cultivating a sense of self that's separate from your thoughts, a place from which you can be with your thoughts in a relationship with thoughts, but without being identified or merged with them. Now, I think that's pretty profound.
It is, and I want to tell our friends a story, a quick one, about, I guess it was about 20 years ago. I was beating myself up over a mistake I'd made, and I had beat myself up pretty good for about 3 or 4 weeks, and I finally came to my friend Gary, and I told Gary about this mistake, and I was beating myself up, and I was low, I was down over it, everything. And he looked at me and he said, well, that was a dumb mistake, wasn't it? I said, yes, it was. And he said, you ever going to do it again? I said, no, I'm not. He said, good, let's get to work. And that was the whole conversation. You ended 3 weeks of pain and suffering that I was beating myself up over by simply saying it was a dumb mistake. You're not going to do it again, are you? No, let's get to work.
Move on.
And I moved on.
So, remember, folks, I'm going to read those 3 things again to you because I think they're important. That when you do this and put your hand, okay, you're loosening your attachment to negativity and suffering. You're building the muscle that you use to direct your own attention, and you're cultivating a sense of self that's separate from your thoughts, a place from which you can be with your thoughts, in a relationship with your thoughts, without being identified or merged with them in pain. I think that's profound.
Yeah, Nancy's pretty smart.
Despite the rumors our mind may proliferate, when we peel our attention away from what hurts, we don't feel abandoned, uncared for, or invalidated. All the things we feared would happen. Our negative thoughts are not missed. As it turns out, if we don't hold on to our pain doesn't hold on to us.
You know, as you're reading all of that, I keep thinking about what you pointed out to us. Our worst enemy in this life
Is us.
And we bring the pain and suffering and the fear and all the things that hold us back. We're the one responsible for it. And basically the author is saying, once we realize that, why not change it? Because being happy is a far better idea.
This is what she says in regard to that. To dismiss thoughts of pain is not to dismiss pain. Whatever you've lived, every experience and emotion has become a part of you, integrated into the fabric of who you are now. The you who turns away from the painful thoughts and turns back to the present moment already contains the experiences you're trying so hard to hold on to. You don't need to constantly remind yourself of the pain to keep it. The pain won't suffer when you stop rigorously attending to it. It isn't waiting on the side of the road for you to come back and get it. So quit attending to it. We tend to spend our whole lives looking for a way to fix the past so we can have permission to enter the present, only to find out that we don't need permission at all. We are in the present.
What a revelation.
I think it's an interesting book.
Yeah, basically saying stop beating yourself up and be in the present and enjoy your life and be happy.
And try to understand, give your pain its due, and then understand when enough is enough.
Yeah.
And move on.
We'd like to hear your comments. You can reach Gary at GaryCJohnson.com. I always love what Gary says about this program. The goal is to just reach one person. If we reach one, that's good.
That's all.
If one person is happier or is living a better life because of it, then we did our job. And as we're going along, we're both learning.
And I really want to thank that one of you that didn't click us off.
We want to thank all of you for tuning in. It does mean a lot to Gary and me both, and we appreciate you being at the show. There's simply the law of life. There are laws. What you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. We do appreciate you tuning in. For Gary C. Johnson, I'm Keith Casebolt. As always, Gary and I look forward to seeing you again next week, right here at the same time.
Thank you for watching Simply the Law of Life, a program created by attorney Gary C. Johnson. Until next week, may you be safe, blessed, and happy.
If you're hurt, injured, don't waste time. Gary Johnson cries for every dime.